Nice to see you in the Learning Lab. I just want to give a big shout out and thank you to everyone who attended our session live today, and also provide the takeaway materials for anyone who is unable to be there. Also, of course, this is something you can revisit over time. So this is the video of the recording of our first Learning Lab session, which was on aligning your values to attract ideal clients. In addition to this video, you're going to find the workbook that goes with it below. Make sure to check it out, and thank you for joining us in the Learning Lab. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Learning Lab. I'm going to go ahead and share my screen, and while I'm doing that, let me know where you're logging in from today. I'm a little curious to hear where people are chiming in from. And I also just want to take a moment and say welcome. Welcome to aligning your values to attract your ideal clients. And first and foremost, I just want to thank you for taking some time out of your busy schedule to be here with me, particularly this time of year for those of you who are in the midst of maybe 1099s or tax season, things like that. So really, really excited to hear from all of you and to go through this learning journey with you today. So I want to talk to you really quickly about this topic and why it was the topic that I decided to start Learning Lab with, because it's something that I think is really, really important to build foundations before we dive into a learning journey. So I designed the Learning Lab program. And when I say designed, what I mean is that I woke up one morning in the middle of the night at 1 a.m. and I just felt this really, really strong desire to create a space or a container for learners to connect with one another and to connect with continuing education. But when I designed it, the first thing that I felt so compelled to talk about was this idea of core values. Because I believe that both in life and in business, anything that we do that has really true meaning comes from our core values. So that's why we're starting here today with this idea of how do we get in alignment with those values, both within ourselves and within our business, in order to attract the right people to our activities. So in the space that I work in, I do a lot of coaching and I do a lot of consulting, and I work with business owners and operators, and I start to notice common problems or common patterns. And one of the patterns I started to notice over time, particularly in the space of entrepreneurship, was that the people I knew that were really, really thriving were in touch with their core values. And they didn't just know what those values were, they actually operated from them and they made decisions based on them. And they were able to repel the people they didn't want to work with because they knew those values so strongly. So that's why I think it's so critical to start here, because I believe that values define everything we do in business. So let's go ahead and dive in and talk about them. Okay, so this might look like a lot, but it's actually pretty straightforward. Essentially, we're going to cover some general logistics right out of the gate. Just for those of you who are new to the Learning Lab model, it's something that has never existed before. So I want to just give you some explanation, some background on the way the program works so that you can get the most out of this session and out of the materials that are going to come after. Then we're going to dive into today's content, and we're going to just start by talking about what values actually are. I think it's really important to lay some foundational language and some groundwork there. Then we'll dive into where they come from, and then we'll get into why they actually matter. And then from there, we'll start to explore how we identify our values so that you can take these ideas that I'm going to give to you today and actually start working through them in your own time and through the materials we're going to give you as a takeaway action. And then last but not least, we're going to answer this question of how do we take these values and put them into action? Because if you know me, if you know my work, I'm all about action and really taking the things that we're learning and putting them into practice so that we can get great results. And if you don't know who I am and you don't know my work, indulge me just for like a quick little moment here while I tell you a little bit about myself. So my name is Madeline Pratt, and I'm the founder and CEO of Fearless in Training. I'm also the founder of Women Talk Money, which is an online network for female financial professionals. And I'm also the host of the Finding Fearless podcast. Now, my background is quite interesting and it's way, way, way too long to fit into a single slide. But from a career perspective, I've worked in this pretty cool intersection between technology companies that were wanting to connect with entrepreneurs and accounting practices. And I've filled a variety of different roles that have to do with helping educate folks and the wider market about using technology solutions to grow and scale. Now, I've also worked as a business development leader, connecting with different tech companies that wanted to partner together to build better solutions. But as I built my career in tech, I started to notice a major gap between the people that we were trying to serve and the technology. And despite everything that was being created and innovated on the tech side, a lot of people were still not quite getting it. And I knew it was because of all the companies that were out there were teaching and training only on the things that taught you how to be better with their products. But quite frankly, I saw and knew that there were these things that certain entrepreneurs and business owners were doing that set them apart in this space and led them to scale and be successful. So those are the things that I'm really passionate about because I don't just see these as business development skills. They're actually personal development skills. So that's why I created my company Fearless in Training, is to offer immersive educational experiences for ambitious entrepreneurs who really want to dig deep and find and discover and do work in this space of personal and business development. And one way that I decided to teach these things is through Learning Lab. So I want to take a quick moment here and just step back and talk about some of the logistics of the Learning Lab experience because it's brand new and it's something that me and my team created for the world. And making programs like this, which if you know me, I've created several of them throughout the course of my career, but making programs like this is really exciting and amazing to me because it was just something that was an idea just a few short months ago. And now it's an actual tangible thing that's out there in the world and you're getting to experience it. And I'm just so honored to have you here to be a part of it. So as I mentioned earlier, Learning Lab came out of this idea of creating a container of space for ongoing learning to happen. But the Learning Lab experience is pretty unique. So as some of you have already seen, there is a portal, and this portal is a place for us to put ongoing education materials for you. So this is where you're going to find articles, you're going to find online courses, you're going to find a webinar like this one after the fact, you can revisit it, and you're also going to find member directories. Now, we put some new tools and resources over the weekend in the member portal. We're always going to be adding into it. And it's also where you'll find the takeaway materials from today's session. So the portal is where we're going to continue to surface up these types of materials so you can review them and you can leverage them in your own time. And we've broken the materials down into key areas and categories so that it's easier for you to find what you need to support your learning journey. Now, the cool thing about the portal is that it's a two-way experience, which means that when we put things into it, you can comment back and tell us what you think about them. Everything inside the learning portal is free for you to access with the exception of our course materials, which you get a discount to. And I'll talk about those a little later. Now, the other way we have to interact with you as our Learning Lab members are these live sessions, like the one you're attending today. So live sessions will typically happen one time a month, and we may have occasional bonus sessions, and the dates of times of anything we're doing live will always be inside of your member portal, and we'll also send you meeting invites. And of course, we'll email you so you'll get reminders and make sure that you can show up for these things. And if you can't show up for them, we'll add recordings into the member portal. But really, we see the source of truth as being that member portal because we want you to be logging in there to continue your learning. So because of all of this information we're throwing at you, I think it's just really important for you to remember that, this is a one-time session, but we want you to be able to go back to the things that you've witnessed and say, what are the things that really matter to me? Where are the areas that I need to do more learning? And then you can dive back in and revisit these things. And then you'll also get to dive into supporting materials. So we'll have a workbook from today, and all you have to do is log back in. You'll find it in the Learning Lab section, and then you can revisit it simultaneously with this session so that you can really get the most out of this work. So that's the Learning Lab experience in the nutshell. If you have any questions or if any of that is unclear to you or at any point during the content today, or if you just have questions as we move through the content today, pop it into the Q&A section here in Zoom and we'll address them at the end of the session. Okay, so logistics out of the way. let's start talking about values. So I think it's really important when we move into a new concept, or even a concept that's a little esoteric, like core values, to really dig in and think about where these things come from. And one of the ways that we can do this is through identifying other language or terminology that can help us dig in and understand what we actually mean when we say values. So, values are these ideas or beliefs or mantras that we carry with us as we move through the world that shape what we think and how we act or react in certain situations. So these words can be used to see that there are multiple elements to an idea like values, and they can help us tease out a little bit of meaning here. So when I say beliefs, this means that we realize that values are the things that we believe within ourselves. These could also be the things that we were taught to believe. It could be something that tells us that there might be a little bit of a societal element to play here. So this could be the way we were brought up or the way we were raised. This could also be, how we see things that we consume through TV or the other media we consume. But wherever these beliefs come through, we know that they are something that are ideas that we carry with us as we move through the world, and they shape the way that we see the world. And that's where this next idea comes in. So ideas are a little bit different from beliefs. They might feel a little bit more fluid, and they may also be a little bit more collaborative in nature. So ideas are oftentimes things that come up or pop up within us or in other people, and we can test them out. We can play around with them with other people to see if they work or see if they're true to us. And this is really, really important because it's in this space of ideas that things can shift or expand or evolve, which means our values can shift, expand, and evolve as we learn and collaborate in the world. And then there's this deeper, maybe the deepest layer to values, which I refer to as mantras. And those of you who know me outside of the learning space know that I'm a yogi and that I do a fair amount of meditation in my free time. And a lot of my meditation practice is driven around the idea of mantra. And essentially, mantras are what I like to believe as these words or messages that come from within. And these are these intuitive things that we know within ourselves that we find to be true. And if you're somebody who works at that level or at that level that I do, you'll start to see and believe that these mantras come from our souls and that these are messages that we hear when we need them most. And these are the messages that help guide us as we move through the world. So now that you have some additional language to expand on this idea of values, I want to give you some hints or ways to test and validate and know if something is simply a thought versus if it's really a value, because this is a process we have to move through if this idea is of uncovering and defining your values inside of your company. So if you want to hold something up and be able to make sure it actually is a value, you can start by double checking it against these 4 areas. So one is simply checking to see if it is something, a belief, a mantra, or an idea that helps us to shape, test, define, and validate our experiences within the world. So you could ask yourself, does this define how I see and how I process things? Test number 2 would be, is that it's something that means so much to us that it inspires us to act, and hopefully it's an action we're taking for the greater good of the world. Now, as we all know, there are a lot of things that we don't have to do in the world. But if it's a non-essential thing that inspires us to take action, that's a pretty solid indicator that it's a core value. So let's take an example here. I'm connected to a lot of people that are incredibly passionate about animal welfare, and they feel so inspired about this that they go out and they give back by taking care of animals or volunteering their time to animal shelters. Now, this is a non-essential activity. No one has to do that. It's not essential for their survival. But if they value and believe that all lives, whether animals or human, are equal and matter in the world, that's going to inspire that person enough for them to take action. And of course, when we look at that, that's for the greater good. Now, another thing that helps us to say, if something is a value and not just something that connects us, is that we can look and say, oh, this is a place where we can find common ground. So we can actually test and see if something is a value. And we know it is one when it creates common ground for us to find, connect, and share stories with others. So that's where values become so critical within our business. Because if we can go out and create common ground with the clients or customers we want to serve, we can actually find that by sharing our stories and values through what we do in business. But of course, we first have to know what those values are. And then the last qualifier that our values, truly can come through is that we look and we see if they define who we are and how we behave in the world. So this is really, really amplified in the world of business. In our personal lives, we make a lot of decisions on the day-to-day basis that are private, and they only affect our lives and those who are influenced in our inner circle. But when we do that in business, when we make business decisions, we're putting things on a much bigger stage and potentially impacting many more people, like our employees, our customers, our vendors, you name it. So business gives us this opportunity to play into our values in a much bigger, much more impactful way. So this, in an essence, is what we want you to take away from this section about what values are. And it is this idea that they, in their truest form, are our beliefs, mantras, and ideas that we carry with us to shape how we see and share in the world. So that should give you some little nuggets in terms of what values are and some ideas and terminologies to take away with. And if you're still scratching your head a little bit, don't worry. We've got a lot of exercises and questions that we're going to help you as we move through these next sections. And they're also going to be in your workbook. So take these ideas, just allow them to be some common ground and foundations about what we mean when we say values. So our next question to ask is, where do values come from? And this is a core question that a lot of us start to wonder, particularly when we're starting to navigate in this space of, is this really my core value, or is this something that I was taught to believe? Now, our values come from a lot of different places, but one of the most common ones, and ones that we've all witnessed a lot in terms of our cultural values, has to do with where we grew up in the world and also the time period that we were raised in. And we're seeing this really, really interesting contrast in our current cultural zeitgeist right now. And regardless of where we fall on the political or ideological spectrum, I think that we can all say we're experiencing a time in America where there is a deep cultural contrast. And even though we all grew up in the same place in the world, baby boomers, for example, were born into a society that is so dramatically different than, say, that of a millennial. And I think we could all poke fun here at this, and there's way too many clickbait articles out there in the world talking about, like, oh my gosh, boomers this and millennials that. But if you just step back and say, like, whoa, we grew up in two completely different Americas. That's where we start to see our foundational beliefs, our core values might be really different. And that's why we're experiencing such a contrast in our society right now. So case in point, I'm starting to see my son's generation, and he's what we would consider to be a Gen Z. And as I look at his generation, he and his peers have come up in a world and a time period where there is a ton of instability and worry about the climate and the environment. So whereas my generation, the generation before him, or maybe two before him, oftentimes had to be taught to be environmentally conscious, my kid just lives and breathes this stuff because it's steeped into the culture he's being brought up in. But our values don't just come from where we're brought up in or the era we live in. They also come up from a lot of other things. So these are the 6 additional things that may shape or impact our values. And these are the things that I'm going to say are much more in our personal control. We don't get to decide before birth, where and when we're going to come through in this world. But these 6 other elements are things that we can actually have a lot of control over, particularly as we move into the adult stages of our life. And we can start to define who we are and how we want to show up in the world and in business by looking at them more closely. So the first one here is our relationships. And relationships often define what we believe very early on in life. And so it's really, really critical as we develop for us to look back at some point and ask ourselves, Are those early values that came from my friends and my family and my teachers, are those my values still? We've got to question ourselves here. They might have been in my parents' values or from the school I went to or however I was brought up. But if this is not my values anymore, we have to look at that. And this is also a time where we get to create our own relationships. As we move into the adult stages of our development, as we get older and older, we have control over the relationships we bring in. So this is where we get to call in people and choose who our friends are and who our business relationships are and who are the people that we surround ourselves with. And I'm this big believer that your vibe really attracts your tribe. And so we can choose our relationships, and in turn, we can be aligned with our values and amplify them in a really, really important way through the people we bring into our lives that help us shape and reinforce our values in some fashion. Now, the next element is the media. And I don't have to explain this one too much. We've all learned and seen how it can be used for good or it can be used for evil. And simply said, the content we consume can shape what we believe. And so again, same as this thing with relationships, we can either reinforce these things or we can shift beliefs through the media we engage with. And for the record, I think that there's some really enlightened media out there. This course is a form of media. So there's some really educational material out there and there's some dark stuff. So we can be really present with ourselves and we can start getting conscious about what we're consuming because we have to look under the surface and realize that this can have a huge influencing effect on us. Now, the next step is our lived experiences. And I want to be really clear here that some of these things we can choose and some of them we can't. But despite what we experience in our life, we can choose how we frame and how we react to these experiences. Now, how we were raised and the moments we lived through, be they positive or be they traumatic or be they whatever they may be, they're going to define how we see and shape the world. And I often think one of the easiest examples for us to reach for here is religion, because, this shapes the light through which we see the world. So some of us may have been brought up in a school of thought or a faith that really define the way we see things. And we can choose to seek that out further, or we can shed that later in life if it's something we don't align with anymore. So what we've been through and the institutions we were brought up in shape how we see the world, and we can choose whether to continue on or to seek new ways and new experiences. Now, this next one was really defining for me, which is witnessed injustices. And this is any time in a lived experience, but it's not an ordinary moment. It's not just, how we were raised or what we've been through. This is a poignant moment where we saw something and we said in ourselves, this isn't right, or this isn't fair, or this is wrong. And that usually sparks a really firm belief, because negative moments can be really defining moments that tell us things like, I don't want to live this way, or I don't want to be that person, or I don't want to subject myself to this, or I won't tolerate this, or most importantly, I want to change this. And again, even though a negative moment can create a value, it can actually be a driver for you to take positive action because you perceive something as wrong in the world. Now, the fifth would be inspiring moments. And this is kind of the opposite of witnessed injustices. This is what I like to consider these moments of pure joy or pure inspiration or pure wonder or pure presence, where you're a witness to something that calls out who you could or should be. And these are really big moments that inspire us to take big steps, and they can change the way we see the world. Now, the last one here is something that I think we're all born into. And it's something we can choose whether or not we tap into. And it's what I refer in my work as your unique light. And if you know me and you know my work, you know I have this fervent belief that every single person comes into the world carrying some kind of light, some kind of gift to share. And I believe that light is unique to each and every one of us. And I think that our purpose here in this planet is to tap into it and to let it shine, to connect with your purpose and to find meaning and to pass that light on to make the world a better place.
Now, I believe that some people uncover that light and some people lean into it, and that creates magic and evolution in the world. And some people deny that light or struggle to see it, and that can also influence and shape the way that they see the world. Now, this closing piece that I want to give you here, when it comes to where our values come from, is this really important message that the values that you were raised with don't have to be the ones you stay with. And I think that's a critical moment for some of us who go through and take a look backwards. And for some of this, it takes a lot longer to find space where we can look back at who we were raised to be. But when we take the time to look back at the values we were passed down by our parents or by the world we grew up in, the culture we grew up in, we can then look at ourselves and ask, who do I want to be? Who do I want to become? And you get to decide. You get to define who you are. And what I want you to carry with you is that idea that you can always reevaluate these things and you can always evolve your values. If we're going to have an abundance of opportunities to make this kinds of evolution based on the lessons we learn in life, we have to be asking ourselves questions. So as you move through your workbook later on, just make sure to check the values that are coming up and start to define them by asking yourself, is this really something that comes from me? Is this really something that I believe, or is it something that was bestowed upon me? And if it's something that was bestowed on you, then you get to ask, is this really something that I want to live my life by now? Is this something that I want to define my work by? Is this something that I really believe reflects who I am? And if the answer is no, then you get to let it go because you get to bring in the values that really matter to you. So, why do values matter? Why should they matter to you? There's a lot of things to be said here. And this little brain on the left is me trying to find a representation of some of my broader values. And if you look at all these little icons I've got here, they represent things like education and the environment and competition and fairness and creativity and travel. And these matter to me because, quite frankly, they're the driving force between all of the non essential actions I take in the world. And for you, this means that your values define anything and everything we spend our energy and our time and our money on because it's something that we value. So, if we really want to shape a life that we love and that we enjoy, we have to be operating from our values. That's why we know what they are, is because we're exercising them, and that's where we find joy. And I know a lot of people who are very unhappy and are doing things that make them very unhappy in their life and in their businesses, even because they're not in alignment with their values. And it isn't until we uncover them that we can start living in alignment with them and find true happiness. They also matter because they are connections to our hearts and our souls. And I know that may sound mushy to some of you, but our values are what gets us in touch with who we are, and they make us look within and they give us another layer of guidance, particularly when it comes to making tough decisions or taking the next steps in our lives. Values are what connects us inwards to ourselves. They're what gets us out of our head and into our heart. The other thing that values do is they allow us to speak from a different place. This is something that we do in business because when it comes to our values, it means we're doing something different. It fortifies and deepens our decisions and our convictions. So when we're able to say, we're not going to do this because it doesn't align with our values, it allows us to show up without pretense in business because it means we're going to truly show up as we are and not who we think other people think we should be. It means we're not playing pretend, and it means we're not showing up as anybody else. We're not trying to emulate somebody's idea of success or emulate their idea of their company or what has worked for somebody else. We get to be ourselves and lean into who we are and what we're great at in business. So I want to take a moment here and I want to let this marinate. And I want to ask you an initial poll question because I think it's a really, really important one for us to ask. And this question I'm going to ask you is, have you ever let a client go because they weren't aligned with your values? So take a moment here and just answer the first one for me. Have you ever let a client go because they weren't aligned with your values? And I think it's a really important thing to think about because, this is a moment where we defined who we were in business and we stood up for the things that we believed. So if you haven't already, take a moment. There should be a poll question on your screen here and click just yes or no. Have you ever let a client go because they weren't aligned with your values? So I've had about 25% of you answer in. So if you haven't taken a second here, jump in, use the poll as a moment to identify your answer. And I'm going to close it in about 10 seconds. We've got yes. Okay. 50%. Give you about 10 more seconds. And what I'm seeing is that 100% of us have answered yes. We've let a client go because they weren't aligned with our values. So I'm going to end the poll questions now. Okay. So 100% of us said that we've let a client go because they haven't aligned with our values. So clearly, our values influence our business decisions, particularly when it comes to the clients we choose to work with. And this reinforces that values really matter for another reason, and that's because they unlock so much of our potential. Values matter because they can create connections, and connections are really opportunities, particularly in business. So, being in touch with our values allows us to build connections and relationships with our clients or customers based on them, which means that these relationships and connections are so, so much deeper. And this allows us to really start to see who they are, not just because we're making decisions based off of them, but because we're showing up and showing who we are in business. Now, values also matter because they create consciousness. And consciousness is a level of connection and understanding between people that doesn't have to be defined, but it's something that we feel and we intuitively know. And we are moving and shifting into a world and a society that really wants to be more conscious. And this shift towards a more conscious state is unfolding because we've operated from a state that, quite frankly, is a really heady state and has made people make a lot of decisions based off of what is the best for the bottom line and what is the best for corporate stakeholders. And it's caused a lot of really intense impact and imbalance on our planet and on our people. So we're at a bit of an edge, at a breaking point, and we can feel this in our culture. So as a result, we're wanting to right that and shift to a more balanced place. And this is especially true for my generation of entrepreneurs, which means we're wanting to shift towards this value-driven world. Now, this means that people want to do business in a different sort of way. So if you're a company that is showcasing your core values, that is something that a customer can reach out and connect with at a deeper level. And it means more to them than just any other business because our values show people who we are and what we offer is in alignment with who they are. So this means that if I transact or I work with you, that it's actually a reflection of who I want to be and how I want to show up in the world. Most importantly, though, I want you to walk away knowing that in business, values matter because they are why you're an entrepreneur. They're also why you're on this webinar today. They are the forces within you that make you show up and be passionate about what you do and want to learn more and be better at the work you do because the things that you create come from inside of you. It comes from something that you believe needs to happen. And because that belief is so profound, you take action every day for the greater good and you show up to create new things and because you know whatever you bring into the world and in your business is in alignment with your values. And if you don't believe me, if this is a little too woo for you, just think about the last job you had before you started a company. And I'm going to take a wild guess here and say there's a pretty good chance that you left behind other opportunities. And it's not because you're not smart or you couldn't do those things, because in the back of your head, if you're like me, you know that if all else fails, you could go out and get another one of those jobs tomorrow. but you left those things behind because they didn't completely align with your values and because your values shifted and changed and you were no longer fulfilled by the work that you were doing. And that's why you created something that allowed you to live those values and embrace them every single day through the work that you're doing. So, this is where things start to get really fun. This is where we get to ask ourselves, how do we identify what those values are and how do we bring them into practice inside of our business? And we can start by getting curious. And I want to say curious because, we get to sit down and we could be super formal about things like this. And we could also take a moment and we could write out those core values. But if we just do that as an exercise, they're not going to come from an authentic place. So I want you to come from a perspective of not just, I'm going to solve this, I'm going to just write a list and it's going to be a productive exercise. Instead, I want you to come from a place of observing yourself as you move through the world. And I want you to start noticing as you make decisions, particularly when they're decisions about the things you do, reflect and say, why do I do these things? What drives my decision making? And as you start reflecting, I want you to do some writing. So we've created this awesome takeaway workbook, which is going to ask you a lot of questions. And I want you to take those questions, then maybe you'll write about them, or maybe you'll just think about them. And some of them are designed for you as a founder if you don't have a team yet. And some of them are designed to be workshop exercises if you have a team. But this all just starts from this space of let's getting curious. So curiosity could start by asking yourself some questions like these ones. So I might sit with myself and I might just notice, over the course of a week or so, what is the content that I choose to follow regularly and why? And so I might look at my core content sources. And for myself these days, these are Medium and Instagram and BuzzFeed and maybe a little LinkedIn and Twitter here and there. And so I might pull up Instagram and I might ask myself, why do I choose to follow this person? What is it that I'm looking for here? What is it that I feel like I share in common with them? And how has that helped me see something in myself or understand more about what I care about? What is it that I care about? So I want you to be thinking about, the same thing with articles you click on or news things that you visit. Why do you read those things? For me, Medium is a great indicator of this because they surface up content based off of the content I'm reading. And we do this here at Fearless in Training too. Our weekly newsletters for our audience are surfaced up using AI based off of the things you've read in the past. So why is my Medium feed full of stories about strong women and female founders? Why does that matter to me? Another question you could be asking is, what is the information that you started your company to share with the world? What did you want to get out there? What was there something that you saw lacking or that people didn't know and you had figured it out and you wanted to help other people understand, and therefore you had to create a company to get that information or product out there? So if you know me, you know that I grew up in a household where my parents both ran their own businesses and they struggled with some foundational level knowledge. And I think that entrepreneurship is amazing. And when I started to gain this business knowledge, I had this deep passion because I didn't want anybody out there to struggle in the way that I had seen my parents struggle. And so when I start gaining business knowledge, I am passionate about creating education and interactive education so that people can learn along with me. So that's what drove me to create things like Learning Lab. So this is something you can be asking yourself. What is the information that I want to share with the world? Why did I have to create a company to do it? Now, there are other issues or topics that might matter to you, and you can ask yourself about those too. For me, I ask myself, why am I so passionate about female entrepreneurship? Not just entrepreneurship in general, but female entrepreneurship. And for me, I know that this is because I woke up and I lived in a world where I was told, you can do anything except for walk to school alone. And so as I got through my career and, I started to do things like bring a baby to a conference or, be a female tech leader and, have children, I noticed that there were these, concepts of women can do anything, except bring a baby to a conference. And these contrasts drove me crazy. And so I look at this world where we're having a lot of strong female entrepreneurs, and nobody is reshaping what business means for women. And so I'm really passionate about that. And so that's a topic that matters to me, and that's something I share about all the time. So ask yourself these kinds of questions. And as you start to look at these things, you're probably going to start to realize that these are all connected to your values. So if there isn't, one thing that you can draw in and you can see, oh, that has to do with the story, that has to do with something inside of me. If you're consuming content or sharing ideas that doesn't connect back, then that's because you're actually emulating other people's values. And maybe it's a value you want to step into, or maybe it's just a value you think you should believe, and that requires some evaluation here. So this blossoming flower on here is me telling the story and the experience that is behind the creation of my company. And each of these icons represents a value that we hold to be true. So the first one up at the top, these little, equality symbol or this balance, has to do with a value that we call female first. And this comes from the story that I grew up in a feminist family where my dad was an attorney, and specifically an attorney that focused on human rights. And I was steeped in this value of equality for all. And again, I was told you can do anything your brother can do except for walk to school alone. And so I realized that we hadn't reached this point of equality yet. And so in my company, I work and create work for women because I believe that we've got a little bit more work to do here to level the playing field. Now, the second one, this book here, is our value of cite your sources. Because so much of who I am and so much of what I know has come from the lessons and work and teaching of others. So these inspired people inspire me to pass this knowledge on. And because I am originally an academic, I know that it's really important to cite your sources. And so I always make sure that when creating work, that we're giving credit where credit is due to the ideas that we're passing on from others. Now, this little microscope down at the bottom is a hint to the fact that I'm a former research scientist, but I'm also somebody who just is curious, and I believe that we should never stop learning. And if you're here on the session today, it's because you share this value with me. You're craving more knowledge. You're a learner and a lifelong learner like I am. And I'm a lifelong learner because I know that knowledge is powerful. And I believe that it's a democratizing force. And education literally brought me out of poverty. So I believe in the power of education, and I believe we must keep learning to keep growing as humans. Otherwise, we're going to stagnate. And so you share this belief with me, and this is why my company creates educational content, is to continue this lesson of never stop learning. This fourth one, this little icon of somebody on a speaking stage, is about acknowledging our privilege. I am privileged as a white educated woman. It affords me opportunities. And this means it's my responsibility to use that privilege to uplift others. It's also an honor to have that privilege and to have a platform to share with the world in the ways that I do. And if it ever doesn't feel that way, I know I'm out of alignment with my values. So I make a point inside my company that we are acknowledging our privilege and acknowledging the opportunities we have to share and making the most of them to uplift others. And this last one, this money icon, is my belief around earning big to give big. I have this huge belief that the way that we price things, the way that we earn in the world, if we're doing it in a prosperous way, it means that we're not making enough money to get by. It's that we're making enough money to give back. And I would have never achieved the things that I have in my career if it wasn't for the giving of others. If it wasn't for the giving of money to academic scholarships, or people who gave me their time in the form of mentorship, or people who just encouraged me, I wouldn't be able to have the success that I've created in my life and in my company. And that's why it is my chance to shape my success as a means to create and give back to the world. So these are the core values that define who I am as a person, and in turn define everything we do in our company. And I want you to hear those so that you can resonate with them and you can think about not just my story, but how do you uncover your story as a company? And uncovering yours may involve your team, because some of us have a team, and it's really important to include them in a process of defining who you are. So we can do this as a group discussion by asking some of the questions we just outlined and reflecting upon them in a group setting. And we've added additional questions, specifically group-based questions, to the takeaway workbook from today. And you're going to get these to help you dive into some of these ideas of how to facilitate and uncover the common ground in terms of the way that values might be showing up or be shaping the insides of your company. And we're going to add this also a workshop exercise in the workbook that's actually a rundown of a workshop that we run with our consulting clients. And it's a pretty straightforward exercise, and it just involves you asking some rapid fire questions that get people thinking. And then when you have your team together, you can go into this exercise and look for the first words that pop into the minds of your team, and basically you just get them down on sticky notes. And then you put those all onto a whiteboard or a wall, and then you walk through this exercise where you look for patterns, and then you use those patterns as an indicator to define core values. So that's an exercise we're going to walk you through in the workbook, and it's something that can be so, so informative. And if you have a team and you're trying to identify values, definitely make use of these materials. Now, this is the most important piece of the session. And I know we're in the home stretch here, so like take a moment, sit up tall, nice and tall in your chair, take a deep breath. Whew, a lot of content coming at us. But I need you to pay attention here because I refuse to create things that cannot be turned into action. I know that it's great to sit here and to listen to a webinar and absorb these ideas into your brain, but if you can't put them into action inside your life or inside your business, you're not going to create things that create change, and you're not going to get results. So we've got to make sure that we first understand how we do that with our values. So first and foremost, there's some primary ways that we can get right away into action to create critical elements of our business from our values once we have identified them. So even if you've already gone through some of these things, even if you have some of these pieces in place, we can actually reevaluate them and we can refine them to evolve based on a better understanding of who we are and what we believe and how we're going to show up in our world through our business. So let's start with what I consider to be our primary foundation, which is our vision. And then from that vision comes our business plan. So our vision is our why. And this is the purpose and the mission for being in business. This is why we started our company. This is why we're setting out to do what we do. And if maybe there's, this element inside your business where you might be lacking. I've had these moments where you feel like you lose your vision. So please, at the end of this session, if you don't feel like you know what your why is, go out and watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk. This is me citing my sources. Watch Simon Sinek's TED Talk called The Power of Why. It is a very, very important piece of content if you want to have a vision as a founder of a company. Otherwise, you're going to be aimless because this why is why you started your company. And then from there, we can move into our plan, which is really about the strategies you're going to take. So these are about the moves you're going to be making. These are about the solutions or the offerings that you're going to bring to market. So this is, how are you going to price them? This is how are you going to build your org chart? This is how are you going to market yourself? So the plan is you taking that vision and putting it into codified elements and steps that you're hopefully going to take to be successful. So your business plan is largely shaped by your vision of what the company looks like as it grows and as it becomes successful. So these two are very much intertwined. So if you have those already, if you have a vision and you have your business plan, go back. Once you've got your values, go back and say, are we in alignment? And then once we have those foundations, we layer upon them. So first we start by layering on our methods. And in addition to our methods, we layer upon our company culture. So I like to think of this as our what and then our who. Our what is, what are the things we do? What are the things that we do to influence or shape the way our company grows and shows up in this world? And this could be our timing, this could be the products we offer to market, this could be the way, we market ourselves. This is all the actions we take as a company. And timing is a really interesting one. Let's just extrapolate on that for a moment here, because some of us may choose to go slow. We may be slow and steady in our approach to growing the business. And we might scale in a very systematic fashion. Or we might, as I saw so often in the world of tech, just say, oh, we've got to grow. Our value is to just grow as hard and as fast as possible and put the pedal to the metal. And those different methods to growing a company totally result in different outcomes, some positive, some negative. So you've got to think about that. How does our methods align with our values? And then there's this layer of culture. Our methods define our culture, just like our why defines our culture, just like our how defines our culture. So the thing about culture is this is our who. These are the employees we aim to attract. These are our clients or our customers. These are the things that we decide about how we behave inside our business. And all of these elements also really influence our outcomes. So we've got our vision, we've got our business plan, we've got our methods, and then we've got our company culture. And together these form these foundations of action that we can take and make in business. Now, in these things, we're acting out of our values. If we figure out what they are, and if we do that every single day, we're going to realize, where we're on or off. And when we look at it and we see something's off and we do some reflection, we're going to realize that it's because we're out of alignment. When we're failing in an area of our business with our mission and our vision, or when we're failing with our strategies, or when we're failing with our actions, or, our clients or our employees aren't aligning, it's because we're out of alignment with our values. And I want you to sit with that, because you can say, that's woo, I don't believe it. But if you think about a time that you failed in business, and we've all made mistakes, I see them as lessons, opportunity to learn. But I failed, early on when I was trying to scale too fast. I failed when I didn't take time to connect the people I was hiring with our core values. So I had to reevaluate and revisit so that I could scale successfully. And if we really want to scale a successful company, and if we're going to do that, it's going to be because we're aligning our values in these key areas. Now, one of the biggest ways we can leverage our values in business is to achieve a level of success that has to do with earning, because you didn't start your business as a hobby. And if you want to be able to leverage your values in a valuable way, we want to use them to generate revenue. And that's because you want to hire a team member that you can afford to pay. That's because you want to be able to market yourself in a bigger way. That's because you want to be able to bring new products to market, whatever that thing is. And so to do that, we've got to attract clients. And I'm such a big believer that if we get really focused and we don't just aim to attract anybody in the whole entire world, but if we actually think about the personas and we get really clear on who our ideal customers are, we can do this in a much better way. So the way that we can use our values to attract those ideal customers is by defining them in 4 key areas in our business based off of our values. So first and foremost is our offerings. Our offerings are, what is it that we create for others to experience as a company? What are the things that are tangible? What are we putting out in the world? So this could be a product, or if we're a service-based business, this is the actual customer experience, what it feels like to be served by our business. So say, for example, we want to attract an ideal client that is really, really into education. And in the case of Learning Lab, we've got to make sure that we're creating top-notch educational content offerings so that we're attracting people who see the value in that. Now, the next layer here is our branding. And our branding is really about how you share who you are with the world. And this may seem a little bit elaborate in terms of content, but just know I've got some materials for you in the member portal to help you walk through what it means to build a brand that really reflects your values. But in essence, branding is this amazing, amazing way to share the story of who we are and what we value so that other people can see that story and resonate with that story and say, I want to be a part of that. Or, that's something, or a company that I want to feel connected to. They value the same things that I do. And therefore, I want to be a part of that company and do more with that company. So branding is how we showcase those things through the way that we identify and we codify who we are as a company. Now, marketing is slightly different than branding, and sometimes these two get a little bit muddled, but marketing is how we showcase an offering or showcase who an offering is for. So this is about taking something that we've created. Again, it could be a product or it could be something service-based, and it's about us showing up and saying, this is what it is. This is what it's about. This is the customer that it's meant to serve. And, that's why if you're this type of person that we're speaking to, this is an offering that's ideal for you. And if we leverage our values in that process consistently, if we can market our values consistently, we can attract the clients we want to serve. Now, what this might look like in action, I'm going to just give you an example here. Pretend, for example's sake, that we're a product company and that we create makeup, okay? And we want to attract people who really, really care about the environment, and they share our value that all lives are equal to human life. All animal lives are equal to human lives. And if I want to create a product that speaks to that value, I'm going to create a product that's cruelty-free, and then I'm going to market it out into the world that we use sustainable packaging and that we don't test on animals, and therefore we will start to attract all of the consumers out there in the world who are really going to value those things because that's what we do differently. So this is where we're showcasing to them through our marketing that the product is meant for you. So that's an example. Think about that. How do we tie the values into the way that we share in the world to attract the customers we want? And then once we've got them, this is where the sales piece comes in, which is so, so important, particularly actually if we're not selling tangible products where people can simply click through to purchase, because instead we're selling a service. And sales is really about how we go about connecting with clients. And this is where I really think it's important to stop thinking about it as selling, because a lot of us get scared of the ideas of sales, and to start thinking about connecting and attracting. This can really change your perception, because sales is a huge opportunity to attract or repel ideal clients, because it's our chance to connect with and understand where somebody's coming from and what they value and what they need and what they want, and to share who we are and what we value and what we offer. And most importantly, to see if those two things are in alignment. Sales is also an opportunity for us to listen and to learn a lot about the clients we're attracting, and to say, oh, we keep attracting people who are not actually a fit for us. So what do we need to be doing upstream? When do we need to be making changes in our marketing? Or do we need to change our branding? Or maybe it's our offering. Maybe, we're not getting the right people in the room to connect with because we've got to change what we're offering. Or perhaps, unqualified people are the problem and we're attracting a lot of people, but when somebody comes through, they might not be a fit. So if we're really aligned in our values and we know how we're embodying them in our work to attract other people that are great for our business, then we can use our sales process as an opportunity to qualify out people who aren't a fit for us. That way, we're only working with clients that we enjoy and that are ideal for our company. Now, you may not know who your ideal client is yet, and that is okay. We're going to talk about some of the materials at the end here to help you uncover how to understand these things as the next part of your Learning Lab journey. So the other thing that values can help us to do in action is really handle and overcome tough situations. And let's be honest here, tough situations and the decisions we make in business are really, really going to vary. Now, every business is different. We're going to have good days and we're going to have bad days. But values are something that are deep within us that we can dig into to use to overcome things and persevere. So, for example, we can use our values to repel the wrong things from our company, be it the wrong partnerships, the wrong people, the wrong opportunities, the wrong clients. Like we described in sales, this could be the case where a client comes through and they say something or do something or show us something or tell us something. And you look at it and you say, this is not going to work for us. This is not going to work for our team. And you can say, you know, I don't think we're aligned from the perspective of our core values. And for that reason, I don't think we're a fit to work together. And that's a really powerful place to come from. And that's amazing. You can say no to people because every time you say no, you're going to start to realize that you're getting that much clearer on who you are. And you're going to be able to speak that much clearer to the world, which means you're going to attract more of the clients of the nature that do align and value the things that you do. And we can also use values to define how we handle challenging situations. These could be situations in life, or they could be situations in business. So there are some things in life that we cannot control the events that occur. Maybe it's the decisions of a terrible employee, or maybe it's a natural disaster, or it could be something else that we can't control, and it could be a mistake that we make. But whatever the case is, once the moment has arisen, we can't change the event itself, but we can change the outcome of the situation by actively choosing how we respond to it. We can dig deep in these hard moments and we can look at our values and define our response based off of them. And that can dramatically change the outcome of the situation. So I like to leave you with little tips, little tricks in all of my content. And I call these tips and tricks business blinders. They're just quick and tactical ways that you can shape your perspective and make a decision or shift the lens we're putting our life and our work through to make informed and efficient decisions and take informed and efficient actions. So these are questions that we can put issues through or put our ideas through in order to really refine and define things quickly and be able to move in the right direction for us. So I think one of the greatest simple tools I can give you in this session is this little question of, does this, and then we fill in the blank, align with the core values as a company? And you're going to come out with a very clear yes or no answer here. And then you can inform your decision making. And this is a business blinder that you can use constantly to be able to make rapid fire decisions, to take action based on all of the different things that you're going to be thrown at on any given day as the founder of a company, to be able to say, this is the right move, this is the wrong move. So this could be a project, does this project align with my core values? This could be an ad, this could be an employee, this is a client, does this vendor, you name it. Does it align with our core values? And whatever the thing is, we can fill in the blank and then really quickly say yes or no. And if the answer is no, it's not something we need to be doing or engaging with or even be a part of. And when we use tools like this to operate this way in business, we start to get in alignment really, really, really quickly. We drive much faster results and the outcomes because we're operating from this place of core values rather than making decisions without clear qualifiers. We're coming and operating from a source of truth. And it's a really, really, really powerful place to start operating your company from. I, at one point, worked with a company that had gone through all the exercises of establishing their core values. And I won't say who this company was, but I will tell you that they had it written on the walls of conference rooms, on the walls in the lunch break area. And one day I was just standing there and I was getting a coffee. It was a little break in between some consulting sessions with this firm. And there were some interns that were coming in because it was tax season. It was busy season for the firm. And they were interns that were totally depleted. And the contrast was that they were sitting here in this room, taking their 5 minutes to chow down some food to go back to an 80-hour work week, sitting underneath a wall that said, we value our people above everything. And here were their people, their new people, their newest employees. And they were not valued at all. They were the lowest on the totem pole. Their input didn't matter. They were putting in 80 to 100-hour work weeks, and they were not thriving. And in the accounting profession, the biggest problem that faces the profession is staffing and employee turnover. This is fact. There's been polls done throughout the entire profession, and this is the biggest problem that firms face. And I was looking at a firm that had done this exercise, but they were not embodying it in the actions they were taking in their company. Core values do not belong on a wall somewhere. They don't belong in a Google Doc. They belong in the actions you embody in the world through your company. And if you don't do that, you're going to have problems. And I'm so passionate about this because I believe we can do better. And as I shared with you before, my core values have to do with this idea of never stopping learning. I myself am a lifelong learner, and that is why I feel so impassioned to build the Learning Lab experience for all of you and to put this work together with my team. It took us time to build all of this. It took us money to build all of this. It took investments of energy to build all of this. And we did this to get more learning into the world. So as part of the work that I was building was these takeaway materials for you today. And as I've hinted as we move through this session, by tomorrow morning, you're going to have all of this under the January section of the Learning Lab member portal. So please log in there to get help coming up with your core values. And if this exercise is something that you haven't walked through before in your business, please take away those materials and immediately start to brainstorm and discuss and reflect so that you can uncover them. And then we've also got some great guidance in terms of how you document them. So if you already know your core values, it doesn't hurt to verify here. So for example, you may have them documented, but there are things that we're going to ask you. And so I want you to take those action steps to focus on this question of how do I embody these inside my company? It's not enough for them to live in a document. It's not enough for them to be on a wall. How are you embodying these values through action? If there isn't a tangible way that you can point to, needs to be added to your document. And I want you to look at your business plan, your vision, your culture, your methods, and say, how can we start embodying them through action? So once you've got them documented, your job is to take these things on and then to run with them. We've got materials inside the portal to reinforce you in these actions, but I want to challenge you and say, where do you really need to start seeing the rubber meet the road and get the core values down on paper, get crystal clear on them, and then see how you're going to start showing up for them in the world. Now, I've got another poll question for you here, and I want you to answer question 2 about where do you feel like you struggle most to embody your values? And I've given you 4 options here. We've said branding, marketing, sales, or other, because I'm going to make some recommendations for you in each of these areas based off of what you feel like you're lacking. So if you haven't answered yet, chime into the poll questions. I'm seeing the majority of us are answering sales, and that's really important. I know that sales is super, super scary for people. So we've got about 20 more seconds. Answer the poll question. Tell me where you need help, because I'm going to make some recommendations here. Okay, we've got 75% of our answers, and we just need 1 or 2 or a few more. All right, it's looking like sales. Awesome. Thank you for your answers. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and tell you here about what you can do next. So I'll mention that I'm a fan of giving additional resources to support these kinds of big, bold actions. And as I mentioned, in your Learning Lab portal right now, there are living some resources. So I'm going to embody my core values in action here. And I'm going to say that if you're struggling to embody them in your branding or your marketing or your sales, we've got 3 courses there to help you improve in these areas. So we've got brand building basics, marketing that matters, and selling with your soul. I'm going to say these are all paid courses. They cost money, it's an investment, but you get a discount because you're a Learning Lab member. And another thing that we believe in is accessibility. So we've also got free materials in there, and I want you to download all of these immediately. They live under the additional education tab in a section called resources. So over the weekend, we loaded in there an example set of client personas, which when I was talking about ideal clients further, if you don't understand what I mean when I say that, check these out so that you can help align your values in your brand by understanding the values that you and your core ideal clients share. Then we also added an example marketing plan, which can be a super powerful resource in building a marketing plan and building marketing that aligns with your ideal clients and your values. And then there's a tool. It's a free sales pipeline template, which you can use to help qualify out clients that don't align with your values. So if you're sitting here and we're like, when we're selling, we've got the wrong people, use that as a tool. Look at the questions that we're asking in there. This was designed for an accounting practice, but you can inspire to take the process, use it to inspire questions and the process that makes sense for you as you qualify and align with clients. So check out the resources and the courses. They're all inside our Learning Lab portal. And with that being said, I'm going to bring us home by asking one more poll question. The last poll question is, what additional support do you need to put these ideas into action? So I want to learn from you. What kind of learner are you? Because we're going to continue to create content and materials. So go in here and tell us, do you want another training session? Can we dive deeper into these topics? Are you somebody that wishes you could just listen to audio? We have a podcast. It's called Finding Fearless. Right now, we mostly interview female founders on their story, but if it could be helpful for us to be able to just have audio that you can listen to, like if we could strip the audio from this recording and give that to you in that format so that when you're walking to work, tell us that's what you want. Or if you want to read, if you want action steps in a written format, tell us that's what you want. So I need about a few, maybe 2 or 3 more answers here. And if you're not sure, reflect on this. Let us know in the member portal. Tell us when you see a piece of content, oh my God, I love this. This is amazing. More of this, please. Because we'll listen to your feedback. You are our ideal clients. And we want to know what we can create you to help you as you learn. So with all that being said, this is my opportunity to give gratitude. And I want to thank you so much for joining us today. I want to thank you for answering the poll questions. I want you to thank you for digging deep and for looking at your values. And this is also my opportunity to get open the floor for all of you. I'm here. I'm a captive audience for you. What questions do you have? What do you want to know? As you get ready to embark on this process of discovery and look into your core values, what are the things that I can help you to uncover? So take the time now to chime in the chat or chime in the Q&A panel, and we're going to dig into some of the questions together. And I had seen a few questions come in through the course of the session. I'm going to start with those. And if you've got a question now, put it into the Q&A. But the first question was, when do you think I should create my core values? And, if you're brand new in business, now, right now, don't create a company without those core values. But as I talked about, these are things that are going to be refined over time. So in my company, I come back to my core values once a year. And I look at the evolution that we've made, and I look at the values that we created when we started, and I say, are we in alignment? And as I set a vision for the next year, as I sat down and I laid out the vision for 2020, I said, what are we doing to embody our values in action? So we should think about our core values at a moment of creation, hopefully. If we didn't do this exercise, if we became like accidental entrepreneurs, and now we've got the tools and materials from Learning Lab, create them right now. And then come back with them, use them as guidance as you shape your vision and your plan as your company grows and evolves. So another question I saw come through was, and thank you, Leanne, for this one. It's a really, really powerful one because I see it happen a lot. It was, what if I already created core values and I'm still attracting the wrong clients? This is a powerful one. And I would go back upstream to that place where we started talking about action, and I gave you the 4 areas. So is it, our offering? Is it our branding? Is it our marketing? Is it our sales? And I would look really distinctly. Take those people who are the wrong clients and say, which of these 4 areas was off? Was it the moment that we were defining the offering? We defined an offering, but it doesn't really fit for the people we wanted to serve? Or was it when we were branding ourselves, or as we've evolved our branding for ourselves, we weren't super clear on who we wanted to attract? So we're just like attracting random people. I see this a lot in businesses that aren't verticalized or aren't super focused on who their ideal clients are. Or was it in our marketing? The offering was great, our branding's awesome, but we were marketing the offering in the wrong way. We're not showcasing who it's meant for. We're telling people what it is, but we aren't selling to the people we're aiming to serve. Or is it in the sales process? All those other things upstream are great, but in the sales process, our team is not good at knowing who's wrong for us. And so we've got to really take that process, take the free process I gave you here, and use it as a tool to make your own and say, how are we qualifying out the wrong people so we're not spending time and energy on clients we don't want to serve. Awesome. Okay, one more question here. So this one makes me laugh. Somebody said, do you think it's tacky to have your core values on your website? Because this is probably because I was bashing on like putting it on the wall, putting it on the dock. But I do not think it's tacky. In fact, I have my core values. You can go to the About page on my website and you can read in depth about all the core values, and they're documented in the exact way we tell you to document them in the workbook. There's a defining terminology, and then there's 3 or 4 sentences that describe what the value means and how we embody it in action through our company. And so I don't think that's tacky. In fact, I think it's a really, really important part of your branding. So in our branding workshop and in our branding courses, we teach people how to go through the process of defining values. And as we do that, we publish those to the world to repel away the people who we don't want to serve. So if somebody comes to my website and they don't like working with women, they're going to read the About page and they're going to be like, oh, we're not in alignment because my team is almost entirely female. And so if that's going to be a problem, we're not going to work together. And so it's a great way to repel out or to speak to the values of the people you want to attract. So I love having core values on the website, and I think it's super important. Okay, so I haven't seen any other questions come in. I loved all of those. It sounds like we're all sound in the logistics, but if you have questions, we've got our email, all of our content information here. So if you have questions about today's content, about Learning Lab in general, hello@fearlessintraining.com is where we're routing those. Go to the website if you want to get updates on anything we're creating. If you're not subscribed for our newsletter, go out and do that at fearlessintraining.com. If you want to follow me, I am at Madeline K. Pratt. I'm going to always be shouting about what we're creating. And please, please, this is my one favor to you. We've put so much time and energy into these materials. Please tell a friend about this. Screenshot, go back into your Learning Lab portal, take a screenshot of what you're finding in there. Take a selfie with something that was really powerful. Share that out into the world because that helps us call in more learners like you. And last but not least, we've got materials. This takeaway is coming into the portal by tomorrow. We're going to have a workbook in there by tomorrow that I want you to take to put these ideas into action. We're also going to have a closed caption version of the course. So if anybody needs to consume this content in an accessible way with subtitles, that'll be live by tomorrow. And last but not least, we're going to have our next session in February. I'm so excited. Emily Sikorski, who is a dear friend of mine, is a branding expert, is a master storyteller. She and her partner Justin just came out with their amazing book. I'm looking at it right now. It's in my office. It's called Rooting Up. Emily's going to come by and talk to us about how we use values to start telling our story in our brand. And it's going to be an amazing, amazing session. I don't want you to miss. So we'll add you to that invite. We'll remind you about it. But there's so much more in store for you this year in Learning Lab. And we're so honored to have you here. So thank you everyone for your time today. Happy learning journey to you. Happy rest of the week. And we will see you here next time for our next live Learning Lab session. Thank you so much.
So there we have it, the first episode of Learning Lab. I'm so excited to dive into this lesson a little deeper with you. Make sure to check out the workbook and materials below. And until the next live session, I'm Madeline Pratt, and thank you for joining us in the Learning Lab.